What are the major differences between male and female Kundalini, Sacred Secretion, Christos practices and processes? My name is Coach Matthew. I am a Master Spiritual Life Coach. I'm just going to do the plug right in the beginning here so I can end this a little more smoothly. Go check us out on our website, teampsycosmos.org. Go to our store. You can check out all of our different programs and inquire to work with us if this is something that you've been struggling with, which I know from my personal experience of working alongside a ton of different females today, actually it's probably close to somewhere between 50 and 100 of them, we've been able to formulate and correlate tons of data. So first of all, let's get into the nitty-gritty. What are the differences between male and female? Because there absolutely are. Just like there is a sun and a moon, and there is a male and a female on a spectrum with different parts, so too are there two different practices when it comes to this. If you do your due diligence, you will discover this. This is something that we make mention of in our book, Psycosmos, A Synthesis on Human History and Spirituality, or the other one, Psycosmos, The Sacred Secret of Humanity. You can go check those out on Amazon and BookBaby. Please, we prefer BookBaby, by the way, because Amazon doesn't like us very much, and they hide our books, and they also take a ton of the revenue. So if you are going to purchase a book, please do it through BookBaby. Let's talk about Kundalini, Sacred Secretion, Christos, Land of Milk and Honey, Philosopher's Stone, Prana, Soma, all these different words and titles, and the Nadon of the Chinese alchemy. When you study this to the extent that we have studied this, we're going on probably about 7 or 8 years since we've heard about the Sacred Secretion and started formulating our practices. And if you were curious who we learned this from specifically, Manly P. Hall was really the true philosopher that started this all for us. We read Secret Teachings of All Ages. We knew there was some kind of practice. We didn't really fully get it. Then we heard Santos Bonacci talking about it, which led us to John St. Julian, which led us finally to Kelly Marie Kerr's God Design. All of which are great resources, but all of which also don't go with the full picture on the differences between the male and female. Anybody who's telling you that it's for everybody, it's when the moon goes into the sun sign, that is going against the data by which we are finding when working alongside our female clients. We are getting, and please, if you are a woman, I would love if you could drop down in the comments your own experiences with this, and if any of this resonates with you, or if any of this actually means something to you. First of all, we're having women say that their menstruation and ovulation cycles are now going out of sync from their general norm. Now, this could just be a correlative response due to them practicing Sacred Secretion during specific times. But more so, it's because they are trying to do the method of the moon and the sun sign. Let's go to origin. This is something I always tell my clients. Why do you believe what you believe? Let's go to origin. Who is talking about the moon and the sun sign? Well, this would be a lot of the general alchemists who were all men. In fact, there isn't a single female reference, not even Helena Blavatsky or Alice Bailey of the Theosophists. None of the female figures or leaders actually detail this practice or process at all. The only female that we can find that has any information on record potentially doesn't even really get any credit and doesn't actually have her own specific writings would be Inez Perry, Dr. Inez Perry, who worked alongside Dr. George W. Carey on books such as the Zodiac Cell Salts, and God, Man, Word Made Flesh. So what we're finding is a lack of female leadership in the regard of the Sacred Secretion practice and cycle. And now women are getting harmed. They're having what most people would call the bite of the serpent in terms of the Kundalini. Now, first of all, I really want to make I want to draw a line in the sand here. Kundalini and Sacred Secretion and all of these terms that are being used to describe a very similar practice or process in the body, they're not all the same thing. For example, Kundalini specifically in India from the Vedas was very heavy on sexual alchemy, sexual practices of lovemaking over orgasmic sex, whereas Western alchemy in the European areas did not really inculcate too much or emphasize too much on the necessity for a male or female partner for the creation of this this essence within the body. Kundalini can also be activated at almost any given time throughout the month. Kundalini is a response through breath work, yoga, meditation, diet, practicing, where you are, reactivating. You're creating a chemical response, whereas the sacred secretion cycle or the greater mitosis process is normally a chemical concoction. There's two very different things going on here. This is why the alchemists of Western Europe, East and West Europe, the Western alchemists, they actually bring up Kundalini, but they don't make the parallel between Kundalini and the Christos oil very often at all. And that is because, generally speaking, Kundalini is more of something that you have more of a solar direct masculine grab hold authoritative response to. You can actually awaken and activate Kundalini at most any given time of the month. Whereas for the female side of the more feminine side of this process ruled by the moon, this is something that's more based on a time signature. So whereas the solar one is more direct and you have more control over it, the Kundalini activation can be activated at any given time of the month, which is what is confusing a lot of females and is also harming them. Because when you activate the Kundalini whilst not during your sacred secretion timing, you can actually screw up your cycle. And we are actually getting responses. We've been working with somewhere between, I want to say 50 to 100 women who we've gotten feedback from. It's not a huge pool of data, but it is at the very least a start. And it goes way further than just people putting comments on a YouTube video. These are women that we are actively working with month by month, week by week. If this is something that you might be interested in, again, go check out our programs. But what we're discovering is through research, you can go and look into all of the different ways that organizations, secret societies, esoteric fields and groups of study, the Theosophists, the quantum healers of the 1900s, or even before that, they had the Order of the Eastern Star, which was basically the female Freemasons, just to put it simply. If you actually study these groups, you'll find that they had a very, very deep fascination and emphasis on the menstruation ovulation cycle. And it would make sense because that cycle within the female body is not only being completely under attack right now through artificial methods such as birth control, but you will also find that this was something that many ancient cultures worshipped in a very high degree. It's also a dual cycle, whereas the man is more of a singular cycle. So the masculine approach is the moon going into the sun sign. Why is that? Because it's dependent purely based on the solar aspect of the man's creation, and the men are often alchemically associated with the sun. The reason for this is because the sun is the provider. It's the one that gives the light, provides the seed to the female, who is the receptacle, the receptor, like the moon. So Dr. Eugene Yonash, shortly before birth control was invented, discovered there was a correlation between when a woman was born and the phase of the moon specifically that she was born and her menstruation and ovulation cycle. So it is the same process in philosophy. And all of the wisdom that we have about the moon going into the sun sign of the male figure, those are all male dominated, all male based societies. Anybody who is teaching and instructing people to do, for women specifically, to do the moon and the sun sign, I'm not going to say it's wrong. I think that there's a way that you can actually conform your body. See, the whole point of this process, this mitosis cycle, you can actually take a conscious control of it to some degree. You can actually shift a little bit outside of the general norm once you have enough of a understanding of it, so to speak. And you can actually have a little bit more control over your body and through the power of your conscious willpower and thought. This is kind of like the whole point of why you even study esoterics in the first place, to gain more control and understanding of who you are as an individual. So there's definitely a possibility, especially with how volatile a woman's cycle is. They often sync up with other women, or they'll sync up with their husbands. Specifically, that's a huge thing that we are working through and discovering whilst working with couples. But at the end of the day, the real truth of it is that there's no easy way to say this. The doing the moon and the sun sign for women, and we've even purported this in the past, but now we're getting more data, so we want to correct those mistakes that we've made. And that's part of the whole journey, right? Nobody's going to be right all the time. Nobody owns this process. Nobody owns this cycle. Nobody should be putting their name or their face on this practice. This is something that belongs to everybody. Nobody is the chief expert. Nobody is the chief operator. Anybody who's trying to sell you that is a snake oil salesman. And there are plenty of people who are trying to do that. But with that being said, the female cycle is the menstruation ovulation. Now, which part is which? To be honest with you, we don't know. I theorized with my co-spiritual coach, Richard, who also helped write the books. I've theorized that it's probably menstruation. It is the shedding of the serpent's skin, so to speak, the bleeding out of the vaginal orifice. It's a little crass, but that is potentially where the energy wants to draw up, and so the shedding of the skin as the serpent rises would make sense. Rich also theorizes it could also be ovulation, seeing as how the energy is now more of a lower frequency and it wants to jive down there. Now, the theories that we've had, we've also kind of run parallel with the male cycle. We've discovered that it's possible, not that we recommend ejaculation, but it's possible that ejaculation during the opposite sign of when you were born as a male might be the prime time to ejaculate as a male figure. But the female cycle is very, very intriguing, and it's very complex and complicated, just as the same way as the moon waxes and wanes. So the whole point of this is, if you are a female and you are doing the sacred secretion process, the Kundalini awakening process, again, these are very different, but for the sake of getting the knowledge out there, we kind of clump them together because they're cross-cultural and they kind of talk about very similar things. Kundalini activation is more activating the pineal gland to release cerebrospinal fluid and a bunch of neurochemicals that will allow you to have, which will allow you to kind of operate on a higher vibrational frequency. The sacred secretion, Christos, the oil, specifically the oil, is a concoction that is going to happen autonomously, automatically throughout your body. You do not have much of a control over that. Even though I did say that you can get to a point of mastery, this is something that a lot of Chinese, Taoist, and Vedic monks believed. The Himalayan monks that would live up in the mountains would work on their craft in trying to replicate and control this process at free will in their bodies. And it's kind of like riding a bike. Once you learn the muscle memory of it, it is possible to potentially duplicate it outside of the realm of what the solar and lunar objects provide for us. And that's actually the whole root of why we even study this in the first place, is to gain more of a mastery of ourselves in our bodies. I've already said that. So I want to make this perfectly clear. Anybody purporting that you're supposed to feel this massive illuminating awakening during your sacred secretion, they're just activating Kundalini during the sacred secretion, which is effectively what you really should be doing, but you're not going to feel that activation every single time. What matters is that you just live the lifestyle and you do the right things during those processes, because the way that you'll see it is more subtle. Again, the solar aspect is the feeling. You go out, you step into the sunlight, you feel it directly on your skin. The lunar aspect, like the female counterparts to the male counterparts, is a lot more subtle, and it's a lot more drawn out. The sun rules the day, the moon rules the month. So the way that you actually know whether or not you're activating the sacred secretion properly is if your life is getting better over time. It is a slower grind of a process. Kundalini is more like, oh, I feel it, I feel it, I feel it, I feel it. Now, these two things are in and of themselves, you know, they can become one during that time of the sacred secretion when you're autonomously doing this, and then you can activate the Kundalini. However, it's not every single time where you're going to be able to do this. because of a lot of other different astrological factors until you kind of have a better degree of controlling it. And I have worked with tons of women now throughout the last 3 years specifically. And the data and the information that we've gathered is basically a lot of them are trying the moon in the sun sign, and it is not working. The reason that it is not working is because they are being fed some snake oil salesman stuff, where basically they believe if they're not having a physical reaction, then it's not working, and then they start getting depressed, and then their menstruation and ovulation cycles start kind of going haywire, etc., etc. And there's also this, I don't want to say it's a bad belief, and I'm not judging anybody here who purports any of this information. There's this misconception that not having a menstruation cycle is a good thing. For the female specifically, the menstruation and ovulation cycles are the fertility health of the female body. When you lose those cycles, you are essentially going out of sync with nature's cycles. So if you have been experimenting as a female with your body and you are losing those cycles, a lot of women are kind of undergoing psychosis and believing that that means that they have spiritually ascended. What's really going on is you are shutting down the fertility of your body, and you will age a lot more poorly. And this is because you are over-activating parts of the higher body without giving due credit to the lower body. The body is a wave. We are supposed to be inculcated in all of the entirety of the body. We are not supposed to be ignoring aspects of our divine creation because we have a body as a unit. And just like God depends on us, so too do we depend on the lower spheres of our creation as well. So when you are ignoring those and you are believing that sexuality is a sin, or you are believing that your menstruation ovulation is not important, you are effectively draining your essence, because the hormones that are released during menstruation and ovulation are crucial for the development of the female anti-aging chemicals in the body, which are also dependent on telomeres, and it's dependent on somatostatin versus somatotropin. There's a lot that goes into that. But to say the least, I'm not saying anybody specifically is bad or giving false information, because this is stuff that we've also talked about on our channel before in the past as well. We are learning as a species. We are learning and growing. But the difference is whether or not you're humble to accept that we don't have all the answers yet, or you are very biased and you want to stay stuck in your parameter and your conscious bubble, so to speak, your bias bubble. And there are some people who don't want to even attempt to understand if there's any differences, because they've already done this process and convinced other people that this is the process that they're supposed to be doing. And their lives are not what they appear to be. Even some of the larger creators who are talking about this behind closed doors, I would know. I've done podcasts with these people, and I know who they are behind closed doors, and I know how well or how not well their lives are doing. Whereas I just like to live my life. One time I was on a spiritual retreat up in the mountains. This was pretty recent. And one of my clients asked me a very serious question about the relationship between humans and God. And we were eating, you know. And I picked up some of the food and I said, I just like to eat food. And they all laughed. And there was a whole group of people. Now, why am I bringing up this story? Because sometimes it is just better to live simply. Once you have so many answers, it's better to just live simply and master your own life. So to wrap this up, if you're a woman specifically, if you're a man, stick with this, the whenever the moon goes into the sun sign. But if you are a man and it's not working for you, try to discover and feel through your intuition what you perceive to be the change. Because I've worked with the men, and the men are like, no, this is one for one. This is how it's working for me. I feel better. I feel more intelligent. I feel less foggy in my head. I feel, and a lot of this is just because of lifestyle changes, to be honest with you. It's almost placebo. You're going to believe that things are changing, because you're changing. You're not eating the junk food anymore. You're giving a whole week back to God. And I'm actually the person who has been suggesting to everybody, don't do the 3 days, do the 7. I was the first one to say that, including to all my friends who are currently taking that content and running with it. So take 1 week out of every month, give back to God, and that's it. That's all that this process is. Give back to God. What does that mean? You want to live on a higher vibrational frequency. You don't want to expend the seed. You don't want to orgasm as a woman. You don't want to eat the bad food. You don't want to feel negative emotions. We as human beings are basically filters for the negativity that God is trying to get rid of. So you want to give that time back to God. And that's very difficult to do in today's society, when all they want to do is propagate fear, anger, lust, frustration. But by rejecting all of those parts of yourself and not doing what Dr. Carl Jung would call shadow work, rejecting and not allowing your ego and basically putting the hand up and saying, no, you're not a part of me. It is a part of you. You just have to conquer it. That's all. What these people are now doing is they're just saying, no, you're not a part of me. I reject you. And then now their lives are crumbling. And that is the bite of the serpent, as they would call it in Kundalini. So what I'm essentially saying for the women specifically is, if you are a woman and this process is not working for you, try during both menstruation and ovulation, excuse me, during your peak times, during the peak times of the month when you're feeling your menstruation and ovulation, try to live a healthier, better lifestyle. I would recommend trying with menstruation first. If that doesn't work, try ovulation. But I think ovulation would be harder, because that's when the hormones spike and women want to get frisky. And that's harder to fight. But try the menstruation. Try living a healthier lifestyle. And why do I say that too is because society right now is telling women, oh yeah, just have sex on your period. Masturbate. Eat bad food. Eat junk food. Eat chocolate. Not like dark cacao. Eat Hershey's chocolate, which isn't even real. Eat garbage, do whatever you got to do to feel better. There's a reason why menstruation was so important in the Bible, so important to the Jewish faith, so important to the Hindu faith. They saw it as a spiritual practice for the woman. Ovulation though too, but try with the menstruation cycle. And then what I highly recommend for all the women is to get on board with feeling more in their bodies what is right and what is wrong. If you're not, don't confuse a Kundalini, brain illuminating experience with the more subtler healing aspects of what the Christos really truly embodies and represents, because now you're just conflating things. Which is okay. We're all fallible, including myself. I've gotten it wrong. I will just be the first one to say. However, the other thing I want to mention is menopause. So many women come to me, and especially in the comments, what if you've done menopause? What if it's menopause? What if you've hit menopause? Does not matter. You need to go back and you need to figure out the tracking of the cycles. And if that doesn't work, the easiest thing for you to do is to go and discuss. Here, this is going to be the big thing for the women here who have undergone menopause. Go and discover the phase of the moon that you were born in, and that will be your ovulation time. That is where you are supposed to peak in fertility. And when that happens, you can either do the ovulation or you can add the roughly 10 to 14 days, and you can adjust for that to be your menstruation, even if you don't have, even if you're not menstruating anymore. So, as a final note, we love every single one of you, and if this helps you, please come back to this video, drop a comment down below and share your experiences. If you are a woman and this is not working for you, drop a comment down below and share your experiences, because we are not going to sit here and say, this is it, and we're going to put our feet up and we're just going to rest and say, we did it, we figured it out, and it's all blah, blah, blah. No. The only reason we're going to be able to find this out is through collaborating and working together with other people. It's a very sensible request. I don't think that we should assume, even in our wonderful age of technology that we have anywhere close to the amount of answers that we're supposed to have about this practice, because clearly nobody before us knew what the hell they were talking about either. And the last thing we'll say is actually a request. It's almost a cry for help. There are books by Dr. Inez Perry that we cannot get a hold of. There's one specifically in, actually I shouldn't say where it is, but there's one in a library somewhere in America that we've been trying to get our hands on and we just can't. If you have any resources, PDFs, any libraries that you know of that has this information by Dr. Inez Perry, specifically, it's one specific book that she wrote. I can't remember the title of it, unfortunately. I should have really looked that up. She's got other books out there, but there's one specific book. It's like the Biochemical Secret or something like that. It's a pretty long title, and if you look on her bibliography of like the books that she's written, you'll find it, because it's the hardest one to find. If anybody can help us get a hold of that book, that would be so wonderful. That book probably has secrets that people really wanted to bury, and it's no surprise that Dr. Eugene Yonash, who made all of these discoveries about menstruation and ovulation, his works were essentially destroyed, and then they came out with birth control very shortly after that. You can reverse all of these effects. You just have to work really hard at it as a woman, and the way that you can try to get back into the swing of things is by looking into the phase of the moon that you were born and aligning your lower energies during that phase. Then whenever the opposite phase of the moon, so let's say you were born on a full moon, when a new moon comes around, that would be your menstruation. Even it should be, in theory, again, this is all based on assumptions and works that have been made in the past, it should be, in theory, your menstruation. Okay, so if you were born on a full moon, your new moon would be your menstruation cycle, and then just work in tandem with that information. And again, please, if any of this resonates with you, drop a comment down below. We would really appreciate it. But lots of love, many blessings. I already did the plug. Go check out our website. We love you guys very much. Take care.